Welcome to Project Africa. 25 history YouTubers have gotten together and created videos about numerous subjects about African history. After you're done watching this video, you should check the description, and in the eye in the upper right hand corner for the full playlist. And for me, this video is playing double duty, because not only is it part of Project Africa, it's part of my History of the Jewish People series, because we are going to look at the mysterious Ethiopian Jews. So, who exactly are they? They are an ethnic group from the northwestern highlands of modern-day Ethiopia. What makes them notable is their practice of Judaism, despite having been isolated from Jews elsewhere in the world for most of their existence. So, how did this isolated group of Africans come to practice Judaism? The story told by Ethiopian Jews themselves is that they are descended from the biblical Israelites like the Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Jews. There are three main stories about how they got their Jewish identity. Some believe that a portion of the Israelite tribe of Dan broke off from the main group during the Exodus, and traveled south along the Nile or the Red Sea until reaching northwestern Ethiopia, where they settled and remained largely isolated until the arrival of Christianity. Others believe that their Jewishness comes from the story of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba, who ruled a kingdom located in either southern Arabia or eastern Africa, visited King Solomon in Jerusalem and returned home pregnant with his child. This child would found the Solomonic dynasty, of which multiple later dynasties would claim to have been descended from. The third potential origin comes from the Assyrian and Babylonian conquest of Israel and Judah, which is the origin of the Lost Tribes myth. In this version, one of these tribes, usually Dan, flees Israel and Judah and resettles in Ethiopia. These stories are often incorporated or appropriated by other groups that identify themselves as Ethiopian Hebrews. These groups or congregations calling themselves Ethiopian Hebrews in the US and most other places have no connection to the actual Ethiopian Jews. I made a 90-minute documentary about this whole mess that you can watch later. Now, these stories are a nice origin that fits them into the biblical narrative, but how much of it is true? Well, it doesn't seem like much. The earliest references to the Ethiopian Jews come from the 4th century, around the time that the kingdom of Aksum converted to Christianity. There's also a lack of DNA evidence connecting them to any other modern Jewish populations. All the studies done have shown them to be most closely related to other Ethiopians. These stories are referred to as the Israelite theories of origin, and most scholars and academics don't accept them. However, another potential origin comes from the converts theory. The converts theory is what you would probably expect. At some point in the past, a group of Ethiopians converted to Judaism. This theory holds that Judaism was brought in separately from Christianity. The problem with this theory, however, is that Judaism doesn't encourage conversion. Within Jewish tradition, the religion of Judaism is meant for Jews. And it's important that Jews practice it because those are the standards by which God is judging Jews for the afterlife. God holds Jews, his chosen people, to a higher standard, and therefore encouraging the conversion of others can be seen as jeopardizing their souls if they are unable to keep all the laws Jews are specifically called to keep. Because of this, Jews don't have much of a missionary culture. The closest they have are groups that are calling on Jews who have left Judaism to come back to it. Now, that's not to say that conversion isn't possible. There are stories in the Hebrew Bible about converts, and these stories have served as instructions for people who want to convert. There are stories about groups of people converting en masse to Judaism. However, how widespread these conversions were is kind of hard to know. The most important example, especially when related to this theory, is the conversion of the Himyarites to Judaism. The Himyarite kingdom, located in modern-day Yemen, converted to Judaism in the 4th century CE, around the same time as the Aksumites converted to Christianity, and when the earliest known references to Ethiopian Jews appeared. Some postulate that Judaism could have spread from the Himyarite kingdom into Ethiopia. However, there is a problem with that theory. It has to do with the kind of Judaism practiced by the Himyarites and the Ethiopian Jews. Now, there are many branches of Judaism, but the two main ones you need to know to understand this are rabbinic and Karaite Judaism. The one you are probably most familiar with is rabbinic. These are Jews that hold not only that the Hebrew Bible or Tanakh is spiritually authoritative, but also the Talmud, the long history of written and oral commentaries on the scriptures. In contrast, Karaite Judaism is a lot like Protestant Christianity and that it believes only the Bible is spiritually authoritative and therefore do not use the Talmud.
Ethiopian Jews are somewhere between the two. When the rest of the world came into contact with them, they found that the Ethiopian Jews did not observe the Talmud, didn't celebrate Hanukkah, nor did they know Hebrew.
It seems that the Ethiopian Jews didn't reject rabbinic Judaism so much as they weren't even aware of its existence until they came into contact with Jews outside of Ethiopia. The reason this is important is because the Himyarite Jews practiced rabbinic Judaism.
If Judaism came to the Ethiopians through Yemen, then it would have spread rabbinic Judaism. So this puts a damper on the converts theory. The most widely accepted theory by academics and scholars at this point is the rebel theory.
This theory postulates that the Ethiopian Jews are neither converts nor descendants of the Israelites, but rather political rebels. This theory is supported by the fact that the earliest mentions of Judaism in Ethiopia emerge around the same time as the Aksum converts to Christianity. The language the Ethiopian Jews speak, as well as the language their Bible is written in, is the same as the Ethiopian Christians. In fact, the Bible the Ethiopian Jews use is just the Old Testament of the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible.
The idea is that for some political purposes, the people of northwestern Ethiopia converted to Judaism in order to protest the actions of the Aksumite kingdom. Perhaps they were protesting the conversion to Christianity, or perhaps they were just protesting the Aksumites trying to assert more control over them. Whatever the reason, a self-motivated conversion explains a lot about the differences between the Judaism practiced by Ethiopian Jews and the rest of world Jewry.
If they converted on their own, then that means they didn't have any rabbis or other religious figures to guide their conversion. This means they wouldn't have had access to the Bible written in Hebrew, and instead just used the Old Testament of the Christian Bibles that they had access to. This also means that they wouldn't know what the Talmud was, or what was in it. It would also explain why they shared many cultural practices with the Jews of the outside world, such as dietary restrictions, marriage, and circumcision, all practices laid out in the biblical text. Okay, so what do we know about their history? Unfortunately, it's kinda tricky.
Most history of the Ethiopian Jews prior to the 13th century CE is unreliable. There are claims of an independent Jewish state existing in northwestern Ethiopia, but there's not much in the way of evidence to support these claims. It is believed, however, that due to the Ethiopian Jews living in the mountainous regions of Ethiopia, they were able to govern themselves without a lot of interference. During the Islamic invasions of the 7th and 8th centuries, the Christians were isolated from the rest of the Christian world, and therefore the Jews asserted some level of independence.
At some point after the Islamic expansion, Ethiopia fell under the control of pagan kingdoms until the 13th century, when the Solomonic dynasty gained control, or regained control depending on your sources. The Solomonic dynasty claimed that it was descended from the offspring of King Solomon of Israel and the Queen of Sheba. It also claimed that the kings of the old Aksumite kingdom were also descendants of Solomon and Sheba, as a means of legitimizing their claims to power.
After the establishment of a Christian dynasty, they began to assert old land claims and went to war with the neighboring pagans and Muslims. In the 15th century, the Emperor Yashik I invaded and annexed the region of Beta Israel and began to exert religious pressure on them. He gave the Ethiopian Jews an ultimatum: convert or become landless, following a similar practice that European Christians implemented centuries earlier. This resulted in many Ethiopian Jews embracing careers that were not land-focused.
Despite this similar experience, however, Jews in Europe didn't do much for the Ethiopian Jews. For centuries, rabbinic Jews asserted that they would only recognize the Ethiopian Jews as their fellow co-religionists if they shifted their practices towards rabbinic Judaism.
However, this sentiment began to change when, in the 19th century, Protestant missionaries arrived in Ethiopia to convert them to Christianity. At this point, numerous rabbis and Jewish denominations were willing to recognize them as fellow Jews, similar to what happened with the Samaritans in Ottoman Palestine. However, this interest in the Ethiopian Jews by European Jews eventually declined. In the 1880s and 90s, northern Ethiopia was hit by a famine caused by rinderpest, a viral disease that impacts cattle, killing over half of the cattle in northern Ethiopia. This was compounded by epidemics of smallpox, cholera, and typhus. Polish Jew Jacques Fetlowicz visited northern Ethiopia in 1904 and revived Jewish interest in the Ethiopian Jews. He disrupted Protestant moves into Ethiopian Jewish communities by sending Ethiopian Jewish boys to Europe to study Judaism. He made more trips to Ethiopia, receiving funding from European Jews to set up schools in the highlands of the country. In 1908, the chief rabbis of 45 countries made a joint statement that the Jews of Ethiopia were indeed Jewish. The Jews of Ethiopia came under European control after Ethiopia was invaded by Italy in 1935. They were subject to the same anti-Jewish laws that Germany had coerced Italy into implementing. Mussolini attempted to resolve the Jewish problem in Europe by proposing that all of European Jewry be resettled in northwestern Ethiopia, and it be made an independent state within the Italian Empire. In exchange, the Italians wanted the British to recognize their annexation of Ethiopia, but the British declined. After the Second World War and the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, many Ethiopian Jews considered immigrating to Israel, but the government of Emperor Haile Selassie refused to allow them to leave the country.
Between the 1940s and 1970s, most of the immigration by Ethiopian Jews to Israel was illegal. Some would come to the country on student visas, and when their visas ran out, they simply remained in the country.
The government of Haile Selassie was overthrown by communists in 1974, after which they began to implement anti-religious policies. The question of the Jewishness of Beta Israel had gone back and forth in Israel for decades. The question to recognize them again was brought by the chief Sephardi rabbi, Obadiah Yosef, in 1973, but the Ashkenazi chief rabbi, Shlomo Goren, refused. But after the communist takeover of Ethiopia, the government of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin accepted Ethiopian Jews as officially Jews for the purpose of Israel's law of return. The Ethiopian Civil War and subsequent crackdown on Ethiopian Jews resulted in a sudden large number of them escaping Ethiopia and becoming refugees in southern Sudan. In 1984, the Israeli military conducted a covert action to evacuate Ethiopian Jews out of Sudan and bring them to Israel in Operation Moses. This was followed up in 1991 with Operation Solomon. Israel okayed another mass migration of Ethiopian Jews in 2010 with Operation Dovewing, which is set to complete in 2020.
If this is the first Project Africa video you have watched, then I might recommend that you find the full playlist down in the description or in the eye in the upper right hand corner. However, if you want something a little more specific, then I might suggest check out the video that comes before this in the playlist from Quill and Ink History about the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia. Give you a little more detail about what's going on in this video. Or you can check out the video that comes after this from Mr. Bet's class about Mansa Musa, the African lord who basically disrupted an entire continent's economy because of how damn rich he was. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.